And I want to introduce Jushin Stephyn Butcher, who started his Buddhist journey in 1997, practicing in the Tibetan tradition under Khenchen Gyatso. He's on his way to Hokyoji, where he became a student of me, and his Dharma name now is Jushin, which means abiding trust. And the jukai ceremony in 2013 and did a full ordination in 2017. He works as a software engineer by day and teaches artificial intelligence at Johns Hopkins University by night. And when I read that, I think, man, that's can you imagine having a job teaching artificial intelligence? That would be a really great job to have. In any event, he resides in Cambridge, Maryland, with his husband, dog, chickens, and garden. The title of his talk today is Nowhere Else But Here. So I'm very happy to turn the talk over to you, Jushin. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. As we were saying before we were being recorded, this is all very odd because this is my first Dharma talk ever. Although if one has to give a first Dharma talk, I think being able to sit in a nice comfy office chair is probably a good way to start. I know Tim already mentioned the presence of coffee, so that's also nice. When I asked Dokai for advice, he said, don't be too intellectual and speak from the heart. And on the outside, I said, yeah, sure. And on the inside, I said, intellectual heart. This is hard. This is hard. Those are the same thing for me. So as you might imagine by someone who teaches artificial intelligence. So we'll see how it goes. The title of my talk this morning is Nowhere Else But Here. We very often, I think in their tradition, hear a lot about now. But I thought I would talk a little bit about here and sort of riff on some ideas. The whole talk actually flows out of a single, 4 words in the Pali Canon. And we'll see if I was able to even scratch the surface of it. In the Rohitassa Sutta, it says, "Thus have I heard, the end of the world can never be reached by walking. However, without having reached the world's end, there is no release from suffering." So this is kind of cool because this sounds pretty zen. You can't reach the end of the world, but unless you reach the end of the world, you won't ever be released from suffering or dukkha or I think access to insight. He's sort of translating it as stress these days. Stephen Batchelor thought we should normalize the word dukkha, but it's kind of like karma is. Everyone kind of knows what karma is. Maybe we should say dukkha. I don't know about that, but I always feel like suffering is overkill. I'm reminded of the Alanis Morissette song, "Isn't It Ironic?" And which should really be called "Isn't It Samsaric?" Because the song kind of goes like, it's the black fly in your Chardonnay. It's the death row pardon 2 minutes too late. And like, that's a range there. That's a range of the human condition. A black fly in my white wine to being improperly executed. And she has others. It's rain on your wedding day, free ride when you've already paid, good advice you didn't take. My favorite is 10,000 spoons when all you need is a knife. This happens, I don't know how this happens, if this happens to anyone else, but we have plastic picnic utensils for when we have guests. large numbers of guests, and somehow all the forks disappear. Like, we have 5 billion spoons, but no forks. It's like, so you always have to buy more, and then you just get more spoons. Anyway, the Buddha continues. He says, I declare that it is in this fathom-long body, with its perceptions and thoughts, that there is the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world. And this is sort of interesting. So the 4 words again are that are sort of strike or resonate with me are in this 5, in this fathom-long body. There's just this 6 feet. It's a little weird that everything we perceive is going on out there is actually happening, or at least the image of it, the recreation of it is all happening in here. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird if you think about it too hard. So you should probably but this sounds a little bit grim, because this formulation is sort of the same as the Four Noble Truths. It is the same formulation as the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Except in this formulation is the world, and this world has been equated with this fathom-long body with its perceptions and thoughts. And sometimes, rightly or wrongly, I always find Indian Buddhism a little grim. At its height, which I think comes in Tibetan Buddhism, existence has really seemed to be kind of a mistake. And I've never really quite bought that. I take more of a naturalistic view, maybe. So, yeah, it's hard. We're products of evolution, and if evolution can be said to care, evolution cared about reproduction. It didn't necessarily care about happiness or suffering. And so I think it gives the Buddha's awakening there in the sutra even a greater meaning, poignancy, when he says that this truth is hard, that this truth goes against the grain, nobody's going to pay attention to me, because it's literally not what we're wired for. And so I think it's just amazing that we have this body and this world, and we can do this practice to get more out of it than possibly we were evolved for. So the interesting thing here, though, for me, I want to concentrate a little bit more on the fathom-long body and its perceptions and thoughts here, as this embodiment as being the locus of both delusion and awakening, of being in tune and out of tune, of being out of step and in step. I think it's kind of interesting. A lot of times we think of the middle way as sometimes being a compromise. And it's interesting sometimes, I think what happens is actually it's a shift of perspective, that really we turn something 90 degrees and it's not what you thought it was. So when he's talking about the body with its perceptions and thoughts, we see no mind-body duality here. We see none of that especially comes out of the Western philosophical traditions with Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It's just nature. It's the way things are. It's the body with its thoughts and its perceptions. I want to build on this a little bit more, of this idea of the body and the world. Uchiyama Roshi, in Opening the Hand of Thought, says, usually people assume they're born onto a stage and into a world that already exists, that they dance around on the stage for a while and then leave when they die. And so I think he's quoting his teacher, I think, but the phrasing feels to me like Uchiyama Roshi had read Shakespeare. In As You Like It, Shakespeare says, all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And a little bit more grimly in Macbeth, out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So, yeah, grim. But that's the tragedies, right? That's Macbeth and the tragedies, rather than the soliloquy from As You Like It in the comedies. I actually want to return to this later, this idea of signifying nothing, because I think it's wrong. But it's wrong in a weird way. So Uchiyama Roshi continues. He says, although when I am born, when I'm born, I give birth to my world as well. I live together with that world. Therefore, that world forms the contents of myself, that entire world. Then when I die, I take that world with me. That is, the world dies with me. And this sort of reminds me of a sutra that Dokai often quotes, also one of my favorites, the Sabha Sutta, the All. Monks, I will teach you the All. Listen and pay close attention. I will speak. As you say, Lord, the monks responded to the Blessed One. The Blessed One said, what is the All? Simply the eye and forms, the ear and sounds, the nose and aromas, the tongue and flavors, body and tactile sensations, intellect and ideas. This, monks, is called the All. And this dovetails nicely with another sutra, the Bahia Sutra, where in Bahia travels, it's a great story, he travels in a night from one part of India to the other, and he's basically bothering the Buddha while he's on his alms rounds. He says, no, leave me alone, I'm on my alms rounds. I'll get to it. And Bahia is always like, but I might die. And finally the Buddha gives him his instructions. He says, here in Bahia you should train yourself thus. In the seen will merely be what is seen. In the heard, merely what is heard. In the sensed, merely what is sensed. In the cognized, merely what is cognized. In this way, you should train yourself, Bahia. Sadly, Bahia does actually die later in the sutra, but the practice instructions there are meld nicely with this idea of using the embodiment and the world as the conduit or channel through which practice is realized. And there's actually in the Advaita Vedanta, they sort of talk about this as well. They talk about it though in terms of seeing. So merely what is seen becomes seeing, merely what is heard becomes hearing. And as with all these very, very old traditions, it's hard to tell who got what from whom. But this actually continues on in the Zen tradition. So, and you see it everywhere. And once you think about it, you kind of like notice it everywhere. It's like, you know, when somebody says Volkswagens, and then all of a sudden you start seeing Volkswagens everywhere. It's sort of the same thing. And the Shobogenzo and the 24th fascicle on marvelous spiritual abilities, Jinzu, there's sort of a play here because in many groups, meditation was seen as how you gained clairvoyance and telekinesis and even flight, and it's like so Dogen's turning it on his head, and he says, you know, basically, yeah, sure, there's this marvelous spiritual ability, and it involves your natural functioning in everyday life after having dropped off body and mind with its attendant greeds, hatreds, and delusions. Dogen quotes from disciple Hoan. He says, which we hear it all the time, it's just simply one of my favorite parts of Zen, the concreteness, the natural everydayness of it. It says, like, the marvelous spiritual ability manifests its enlightened functioning in our carrying water and hauling firewood. But it's in Sandokai. Sekito says, eyes and sounds, eye and sights, ear and sounds, nose and smells, tongue and tastes. Thus, with each and everything, depending on these roots, the leaves spread forth. So our life spreads forth. Master Tenkai says, seeing with your eyes, smell with your nose, taste with your tongue, nothing in the universe is hidden. What else would you have me say? This actually reminds me of Huineng after he has gotten the Dharma transmission, the bowl and the robe, and he's fleeing. And there's I can't remember if it's the head monk or some other monk. He was a former general, and he goes chasing after him. And he catches up with him. And he's like, yeah, you've stolen the bowl. Give me the bowl. It's ours. And I forget exactly what Huineng says, but the general is enlightened. And then he sort of like, he says, is that it? Is that it? Is there anything secret that you're withholding? And it's like, no, it's just this everyday ordinance, or it's just to be found in this everyday ordinariness. I don't know if people know, in the very old days, it was common practice for masters in the trades to actually hide steps from their apprentices so they couldn't surpass them or compete with them. So it would be literally masters, and this is in Europe for sure, and it must have been a thing in Asia as well, where the master would turn their back so they couldn't see, the apprentice couldn't see this final step. And so I see that in the general asking Huineng, it's like, well, okay, but is there anything, are you holding anything back? What else would you have me say? It's all right here. It's nowhere else but here. So 2 weeks ago, continuing on the idea of the body, 2 weeks ago, Dokai spoke about the Tenzo Kyokun, instructions for the cook. Now, and this goes back to my introduction, it happens that I woke up that morning thinking about the Kantian categorical imperative, like you do. You wake up on Sunday morning and you're thinking, yeah, I think I should think about Kant today. And so the categorical imperative, at least the first part of it, the first framing of it is, act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. So this is the opposite of what your mother used to say. So your mother used to say, you would come home and you would say like, well, Jimmy's getting ice cream for dinner. And then your mom would say, if Jimmy jumped off a bridge, would you? So the opposite here is, if you were to jump off a bridge or have ice cream for dinner, would you will that it should be the rule that everybody has to have ice cream for dinner? You have to have ice cream for dinner every night, or everybody's jumping off bridges. So for some reason, 2 weeks ago, I woke up thinking about this. And then Dokai quoted Dogen, quoting Bao Ning, protect and be frugal with monastery property, which is like your own eyes, Respect and value them as if they were ingredients for an imperial repast. These cautions apply to fresh and cooked things alike. And then quoting Dogen, Dokai quoting Dogen, when ordinarily preparing ingredients, do not regard them with ordinary deluded eyes or think of them with ordinary emotions. Lifting a single blade of grass builds a shrine. Entering a single mote of dust turns the great wheel of the Dharma. Even when, for example, one makes a soup of the crudest greens, one should not give rise to a mind that loathes it or takes it lightly. Or even when one makes a soup of the finest cream, one should not give rise to a mind that feels glad and rejoices in it. And so I sort of had an epiphany. I was trying to think, like, what is Dogen trying to say here? And then Dokai said what Dogen was trying to say here. But I still had this nagging, like, there's something going on here. And that feels very familiar, and probably seems familiar to me. Because there's a second part, or a second framing of the categorical imperative, which says this: so as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in another, always as an end, and never only as a means. Let me say that again. So act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in another, always as an end and never only as a means. So don't treat people like tools. And we should think this comes really rather naturally. You go to the grocery store and you're at the checkout and there's the cashier. And so the categorical imperative here is we should treat the checkout cashier not only as a checkout cashier and here, check out my groceries, and it's a sort of an extension of the cash register, although in some stores, but as an end to themselves, as a human being fulfilling their lives as well. And I think that sort of, you can't really find a better expression, I think, of compassion than to treat people in every instance, not only as means, because we have the division of labor, right? So we're all dependent on each other. So we need clothes from the tailors, and we need software from the software engineers, and we provide what we provide to the mix. So not only as means, but also as ends of themselves. But what if we were to extend this to tools? Don't treat tools as merely tools. And this is sort of the idea I had about this. Don't treat the ingredients as merely ingredients. Give them their due. Treat them as ends in and of themselves. How do you handle these? Well, that's where you kind of like, this is the idea I've had of like your eyes, handling these carefully, because handling them as ends in and of themselves, just the ingredients. Don't treat the meal as only a meal. Don't treat the knife as merely the knife. Put it back. I started after coming sort of to this idea of kind of treating this as almost like a practice, as a gata. And it made really a huge, it's like, because sometimes I come in the house and just like, you kick off your shoes and they go flying. It's like, no, treat the shoes not merely as, things you walk on, but putting them back where they are, putting them back in order, making the bed, treating the bed as a bed, making it nicely in the morning, not refusing to make it. The bed deserves to be made as well. And just sort of taking this as a practice. And it's really been amazing, but I sort of began to see this everywhere because there's the big one, shikantaza, sitting zazen, right? So don't treat shikantaza as a tool. Dogen says in Spukan Zazengi, for zazen, a quiet room is suitable. Eat and drink moderately. Cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. Do not think of good or bad. Do not administer pros and cons. Cease all movements of the conscious mind. The gauging of all thoughts and views. Have no designs on becoming a Buddha. Zazen has nothing whatever to do with sitting or lying down. There was an aphorism in the 80s, early 90s, punk is its own reward, which is really what we're talking about here. Treating everything as its own reward, as its own end. There's a tendency actually for means to overtake the ends. We've seen this a lot recently when people talk about the economy, as if the economy exists independently of any of us, and sort of not really recognizing the economy as being a means to an end, and even thinking about what ends it should be too. And I think it also sort of leads to diminishing of gauging, because gauging good and bad is part of means. Like, is this a good means? Is it a bad means? What can I get out of this? What can I get out of them? What I can get from them. And if you start talking about and thinking about things as as ends in themselves, tools is not merely tools, people not as tools, then comparisons and discrimination and that sort of thing diminish as well. But to bring it back to the bigger picture here, then all of these tools and ends are ourselves, right? There are our worlds, back to Uchiyama Roshi, back to the body and the perception, ordinary activities and that sort of thing. And so in this great big world, in this practice, we're not ever alone. And we're not alone by, like, you're just not ever alone. And to express this, I want to quote a poem. I want to close with a poem by David White, which I think expresses this much better than I ever could. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you, at times, have felt the grand array, the great chorus, the swelling presence, crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. Doors have always been there to frighten and invite you. And the tiny speaker in your phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. right here now. Moo. All right. Sing.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to make a comment or offer a question or rebuttal? Yes, yeah. You might have to unmute yourself.
I am. Okay. Yeah, so I work at the post office, and one of the jobs there is to take these tubs. They're 11 inches tall by 6 inches by 10 inches, whatever, and they got mail in them to carry them around. And it would be generous to say that 20% of the time I treat them carefully as I'm taking them around. Like, I never thought of them as my eyes, but I will make the effort to put them down quietly and carefully. And when I do that, it feels nice. It feels right. But that practice usually doesn't maintain the other 80% of the time or more. I'll launch them from one tub to land inside the other tub, or I'll just drop them. And at those times, the thought of placing them down quietly like eyes just seems like the stupidest thing to do. And it's just weird how it is difficult to maintain that practice. And sometimes I wonder why. Because when I do that practice, it seems nice to just put them down quietly without dropping the whole tub. But I don't maintain it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I got a lesson sort of in this many years ago. My step-grandfather, oddly enough, my step-grandfather was a butcher, but his last name was Sands, and my grandfather, who was a butcher, was an electrician. So my step-grandfather, he maintained his tools like you would not believe it. He lived through the Depression, the Great Depression, and his tools, his chisels, his hammers, everything were as pristine as they were the day he had got them out of their packaging. And he used to teach me woodworking, and I was making a little sailboat or something, and I had a coping saw, and I had unmindfully, unskillfully sawed into the vise. So I had taken a little chunk of the vise out. And I just always remember him coming and getting me and bring me back to the shed. And he didn't whip me with willow branches or anything. He just pointed out, it's like, be careful if you treat your tools. I mean, he would clean his paintbrushes so clean that you could not tell they had ever been used. And so I wish I could say that I do that. I don't, but I got a good lesson in why you should do
it. Steve, give me the name of the poem and the poet again.
It's David Whyte,
okay, yeah. Okay.
H-Y-T-E.
Yeah.
And the poem is Everything is Waiting for You.
Okay.
That particular one is actually on the internet from his collection. He's actually a Zen practitioner. He's half Yorkshire man and half Irish. And honestly, you cannot do his poetry justice unless you can deliver it in his accent.
Steve, the way your talk reminded me how impossible you really have to work at feeling lonely. Because If you stop doing all the extra things that are not necessary, it's all there.
Oftentimes when I'm just putting like dishes away after I've washed them, I notice myself just sort of like kind of just doing it a little haphazardly. And I guess the thought comes back to me is I spent just a little bit of time with Thich Han. And, I don't know if he's like this or he was like this all the time, but it seemed like whatever he did, it's just like he was just with every motion he was doing. And I don't want to idealize him, but I kind of wonder now, how does that always slip away so easily? Well, there's times, well, I'm taking this glass and now I'm just putting it back into the cupboard. And there's so many other times when I'm just trying to get the job done. Move on to another task. That came up for me, and I think, related to what you said, Tim, with your mailboxes, or carts, or whatever they are. 20% of the time, you just pick it up and you put it down very carefully and mindfully. And but what are we doing the other 80% of the time?
My experience in the Zen kitchen, I think I probably learned more chopping vegetables than maybe even sitting zazen. Because, it's such a life activity that you do in your pedestrian life, not just in your practice life in the Zendo, that it had a lot of carryover. But even now, when I chop onions, it's automatically, I really become part of the whole. I am the onion and the chopper, and there's just action. And there's an intimacy. There is a certain sweetness. There's a certain coming home to. It's a sweet spot. And I think the longer I have practiced, I have the sweet spots they connect like dots. But preparing food in the kitchen is a wonderful practice. And I realize Zen Center, Hokyoji will never get a dishwasher. They should not, because washing dishes is a wonderful practice. It's even good for rheumatism in your hands.
I'm not sure if I've ever learned anything at all from Zazen. I'm not sure. Can't say so, but it's mainly from all the other stuff.
But it's exactly as Henry says. I mean, part of it is you go to sesshin, and I mean, I guess part of it is in sesshin there's the schedule, and at any given moment, the only thing you need to do is what you need to do. Whereas, theoretically, that's supposed to be like training wheels, so you can hesitate to say, your ordinary life, but it's a training wheels. But I, especially under Henry's tutelage, I will very calmly and wash the dishes and put things away and sweep afterwards. And here in Maryland, I'm a bachelor during the week because my husband is a nurse practitioner. He works in Baltimore for Johns Hopkins Hospital. He does medical house calls, so he's up there all week. And all week, the dishes pile up, waiting to run the thing, nothing gets... And Thursday night, because he's coming home on Friday, there's this mad dash to vacuum the house and put the dishes away. And, some weeks it's not quite that bad. But yeah, the vacuuming and that sort of thing is like when there's nothing, like take the 5 minutes and slow down and do the thing, finish doing the thing. And you can't, it's inadvisable. It's probably not the best thing to treat everything as just a step to something else. And that was what I sort of wanted to get back to Shakespeare, which I forgot, of course, on the signifying nothing is, again, the signifying, the meaning, finding meaning in life, I think, is treating it as an means. Life has meaning. It's a means to some end, rather than it is an end in itself. And being as an end in itself, it can just be itself.
I think that would be a great thing about, this is just my imagination, but about having a spouse who would kind of like keep you in check. It's like, I haven't dusted my apartment in weeks, You had a spouse, though, like, could be some like check and balance, I would imagine. But,
There's a little friction too on that score. I have to watch what I'm going to say, because Michael this morning said, "Good luck on your talk. Send me the link." So I'm like,
yeah, you can hear what you say.
yeah.
Kyoko, did you have your hand up a little while ago?
Well, yes, because I've been noticing and working with my own way of trying to use mindfulness as a means. And so I've begun to appreciate the arising of the noticing when I'm not being mindful as an alive moment and also an enlightenment moment. So that's kind of when I realize I'm absent, or I realize I'm being careless with something. And so all of a sudden my mind state changes, and I realize this is just that fundamental how things are, right? They don't stay the same. They're changing all the time. And so that I can appreciate and take it as an opportunity to really take in everything, especially the stuff that I'm dissatisfied with, that I'm hiding from, that I'm afraid of, that's etc. And I'd have to say that's a really it really makes a difference in my sense of my life. It really makes a difference in my sense of what I guess equanimity comes out of that. There's this sense of the and there it is again, impermanence. So there's just so many ways, as we're talking here, I'm listening to everybody and realizing there's so many ways to get caught in this aspect, as you're pointing out, of making my life a means for satisfaction, or I'll just stop there. I appreciated your talk, and I love David White, and I had not heard this poem, so I'm very happy to have it to treasure and get attached to. Thank you.
Genyo, Jim.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Stephen. I think it was an excellent talk.
I think you have a bright future as a Zen teacher.
But it hit, a lot of what you said hit home with me. This week I've been thinking a lot during my meditation, which I know I'm not supposed to be doing, but it tends to go that way. It's been a year, now since we've been locked down. It was a year ago, last week, I got home from California to visit my friend, and I really haven't gone anywhere since then. And being retired, the routine I have here at home is somewhat more of a housewife, or I guess you would call it a house husband. And I take care of the animals and, cleaning the shit out of the litter box and chicken coop. And for a while there, it was kind of getting to me, but I actually started doing this several months ago, kind of what you were talking about today, really focusing on what I'm doing and really not feeling alone. I mean, actually trying to get into the tasks that I have to do and look at them as something to be grateful for rather than to get irritated by it all. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed your talk, and it really hit home. Keep up the good work.
It reminds me at our house when we have guests, we always jokingly say as they're about to leave, if there's any reason that you wouldn't feel comfortable leaving a 5-star rating, how can we improve your stay? I'm like, so if there's any reason why you can't give the talk a five stars, let's discuss it.
You may not want to ask that question.
Well, I know better than to ask it at school.
I gave one at the SCBA, and I think I told you this, Jushin, and
Yeah.
there were like 70 people listening, and I had about 5 people give me a 3-star rating. And they're like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? I mean, most of them were 5 or 4 stars, but it's like I concentrated on those 3-star. But that's just the human mind.
Yeah. And it is. I mean, the aloneness, because I'm in the strange position of being married, but for 4.5 days of the week, he's off in Baltimore, and I mean, I have the dog, but it's not the same. So yeah, but just this feeling of, it was sort of, I was trying to think of what really I know we normally think of a delusion and awakening, but it just sort of hit me as being more of being in tune and out of tune, or in step and out of step, because music and dance are those kinds of things that we do they are their own reward. Like, there's no sense in playing a song. There's no reason to get to the end of a song as fast as possible. Like, there's just no reason to do that. It is for its own reward, and dancing, and so that's why a lot of times playing music is very satisfying. But that is kind of like just this. There's a dance, and are we in step with it? Are we out of step with it?
Okay, folks, we've reached the end of our time, so I just want to respect that. So first I'll tell you that next week, Reverend Shoku Casey Whalen, would you like to, are you still with us? Yeah, want to raise your hand there? I think we all know you. So you are going to be giving the talk next week, and the title of her talk is Taking Care of Blind Spots. So we will do that again next week. If you would like to make a Dana contribution, you can go back to the page and that you came onto this site for, and there's a link where you can make a contribution if you would like. So that's that, and then we'll close with a little our chant, and we'll just recite it once. So I'll lead it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you all so much for participating, and thank you so much, Jushin, for your talk.
Yes, thank you, Jushin.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, everyone take good care. Have a good week, and we'll hope to see you again next week.